Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk, and I've covered this before, the U.S. presidential election, and looking at the issue of vote counting, voter integrity, and the ability of the electoral administration authorities to actually count the votes in a timely manner. Now, I looked at the votes, and I took a screen snapshot of it, the vote counting after the presidential election. This was 2 days, or the third day after the presidential election. Now, you'd think that most of the votes would have been counted by then, if not all of them. Maybe there's a few handful of bits and pieces. Maybe there's even 0.5% of the votes still not, 1%, that type of thing. So you think there'd be very few votes left to be counted. Would it surprise you to know that since this is again on the third day after the presidential election, there was still, according to today's totals, there was still nearly 13 million. That's right, 10 plus 3, 13 million votes that were uncounted, that were not counted at that point. Now, if we look at the sort of total number of votes, that's something in the order of what, 8%, give or take. So 8% of the total number of votes had not been, only 92% of the votes had been counted. That seems astonishing. Now, they seem to have been counted more fully in, say, the swing states, but somehow in the bigger states like where you see big Democrat majorities, places like California and New York and that sort of thing, Washington, D.C., and you see there that magically a lot of votes were found, and there was confusion over whether or not votes that had been posted after Election Day could still be counted, and a whole lot of things going on there. But nonetheless, there were 8% or nearly 13 million, not quite 13 million votes were still to be counted. I assume many of those were postal votes. I don't know. In which case, how come they couldn't count them sort of in a more timely manner? 6-7 weeks after the election, they're still counting them, and the numbers are still changing. As each day goes by, the increments become smaller and smaller. Nonetheless, votes are being found in places and approved by election officials as being legitimate votes. So now you'd think that given the spread of votes on election day, that the numbers would be, 50-50, give or take, 51% Trump, 49% Harris. You think they'd be in that general vicinity. But no, in fact, of the votes that were found since, again, 2 or 3 days after Election Day, the votes that were found and counted and made legitimate since then, 75% of them were for Kamala Harris. I mean, wow. So Trump's ahead 2 or 3 days after the election. Trump's ahead by, close on 6 million, 5.85 million or something like that votes ahead. But come today, or the most recent count I've looked at anyway, of the presidential election vote tally, is Trump ahead by, I think, 2.2 or 2.3 million, something like that. So that's a fairly narrow sort of margin of total votes. That's a fairly narrow margin. Where did these nearly 13 million votes come from? Why did it take so long to count them? And if so, it shows that the vote structure is widely open to corruption. It means that there are people that can just look at the way the votes are going, and they can go out in the back room and invent a few million votes to swing the election if they have to. That's how I'm reading this situation. Why is it there's so many votes? Now, 13 million votes, when you get a winning margin of 2 million or less in many cases, 13 million votes is huge by any measure. So this could swing an election handsomely. What if on election night, Trump Kamala Harris were within a handful of votes of each other, and then 13 million votes was found in the subsequent weeks, giving the preferred globalist candidate a sweeping victory. This is until this vote tabulation, vote counting, vote scrutiny, vote auditing. It needs to be comprehensively examined, because the way it is at the moment, it's as I see it at least, it's completely controlled by the globalists. The fact the globalists couldn't control it in certain states, or they couldn't control it in the swing states, because there were just too many eyes on the prize. They couldn't get away with it. But again, just let this sink in. 2 or 3 days after the election, nearly 13 million extra votes were found and counted, and again, 75% of them going to one candidate. This would suggest that the fix was already in for Kamala Harris. The globalists had already organised these votes, through doctoring mail-in ballots and all sorts of other strange counting. They'd already put that in train, but they just couldn't get across the line on the swing states, which is what happened in 2016. I think they'd already loaded in a few million votes for Hillary, but they didn't control the swing states sufficiently, which again was a situation here in the election just gone. In the 2020 election, they loaded it all up and were able to come with the impossibly absurd total where Biden supposedly got 81 million votes. Yeah, right. So really, and I'm assuming the incoming team of President Trump will really look at this very closely, and I hope any people involved in creating phantom votes out of thin air, which I think was clearly done here, should be looking at facing charges and be taken through the courts, and if found guilty, do the appropriate prison time. You've been Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.